Could you help us, Hedwig?
No, I'm not even supposed to be here. I stole a life from Mr. Dennis, but he'll be back real soon. I can't steal a life for too long, or he'll know and get angry, etc.
You know, that's not what you use etc. for, right? Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cinema Psych Podcast, the podcast where psychology meets film. I am your host, Dr. Alex Swan, and I am really excited about this episode. I know I say that pretty much every episode, but you know what? I am excited about this one because we are going to be talking about a pretty in-your-face example of psychology hitting you right in the face in a movie. It's a really good one. It's Split with James McAvoy and Anya Taylor-Joy, and some other people, but those are the most people, where James McAvoy puts on the performance of the decade, I want to say, by performing several personalities, identities in a movie by writer-director M. Night Shyamalan. His kind of a return to a tour de force after a series of flops. Like, this one was highly regarded as an interesting look at dissociative identity disorder, formerly called multiple personality disorder, hence the whole title being called Split and all of that. So yeah, it's quite a film to have on the podcast. I've been waiting for a really long time for this one, and my guest host is someone who knows a lot about this, has used it in her courses. So, I mean, strap in for this one. And as always, especially talking about a Shyamalan film, I gotta say, if you have not seen this or the follow-up Shyamalan universe film, Glass, which connects Split and Unbreakable together, I gotta tell you,
there are going to be some spoilers ahead.
Yeah, that's right. Spoilers are coming your way on this one, because there's no two ways about having to talk about that 24th identity that is coming along for the ride. This is a horror film. It is a thriller, so there is an element there that M. Night wants to give you. But like I said, James McAvoy is so great in it. So great. And so with that, let's jump right into it. My guest host today is Dr. Lyra Stein, an assistant teaching professor at Rutgers University. She teaches classes in abnormal psych, personality psych, research methods, soul beliefs, myths and misconceptions, I always get that wrong, in psychology, and psychological theories in film. That's a very good one to end with, right? In addition to teaching, she is active in mentoring students and introducing them to the scholarly community of Rutgers University and giving them an opportunity to make connections with faculty members outside the classroom. Awesome. Lyra, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alex. It's great to be here.
I am happy to have you on. Before we jump into discussing the film, as I do with all of my guest hosts, I wanted to ask you about your just thoughts on film in general, and why do you use film in your teaching, considering that you have a class in psychological theories in film?
Well, I am a big film buff, and I think it was about...
Favorite kind of people.
Yeah. And about 6 years ago, I started a collaboration with a psychiatrist, Dr. Anthony Tobia, and he teaches, his psychiatry residents and medical students through film. And I thought,
Nice.
what a great idea. So then I started having my students join in. And then I said, you know what? I'm just going to make this a regular thing. We're going to have these extra credit Twitter movie nights. We come in, we watch a full length feature film, a modern film, usually. And then we tweet about the psychological concepts that we see. And it really helps my students because usually, they read descriptions of personality and diagnoses, and they don't really get a chance to have it, to see the actual presentation.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
Yeah, these were a success. And in 2016, I said, wait a second, why don't I create a course? So I have been teaching the course. Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. And you've been doing that since 2016?
Since 2017. It took a while to get the class approved because they thought all we were going to do was sit around and watch movies. And, I said, no, this is an actual learning experience for the students. And it was finally approved.
Oh, that's awesome. So do you teach it once every year or once every semester?
I teach it every semester because it's a very popular class. And I usually have about 400 students who are interested.
Oh my gosh,
in
really?
taking
If 400's in the... Wow. You've averaged 400 over the past, 6 semesters?
7, yeah.
7, yeah, something like that. Wow. Yeah, I mean, at a large school like Rutgers, I'm honestly not surprised. I'm sure psych is still one of the top majors in the as far as numbers are in the whole university. So that's really, really, really cool. I have I'm actually going to add it to the catalog coming up this year, but I did a test run kind of thing was it last summer? Yeah, it must have been not 2020, not the summer of awfulness. But the previous summer, I got that on the books as a special topics course. So I'm gonna try to get it solidly in the catalog this year. It's a fun class to teach. I enjoy it immensely. If it was the only class I had to teach, oh boy, I'd love it every year. I'd be like watching the same movies over and over again.
I love this movie, this class. And, I try to use different movies each semester, depending on students' response. There's some movies students didn't like. I think I try to show at least 20 movies during the semester.
So I have a question for you because I have a good one for this. What was one movie recently that they didn't like?
They, for some reason, and this is an older movie, they don't like A Beautiful Mind. And
really? Okay.
Yeah. They got bored. And
I can see that.
And they like the high impact feature films. So I just added some new ones. I added Joker and Black Panther. So I try to keep it modern.
Yeah. Okay. Because there was one, and speaking of not keeping it modern, I did one year, in Sensation and Perception, I showed the Beatles' Yellow Submarine, the animated film, and they were so lost.
Yeah.
They had no idea what was going on in the entire film. So it's not one that I will do. It's not one that I will use again just because of that, of what you're talking about.
Yes.
So, Lyra, now that we've discussed, film in general, let's talk about the film that I sort of jazzed up at the beginning of this episode, Split. What was your reason for choosing Split for our discussion?
So the purpose of the course was to illustrate psychological concepts. And the film addresses dissociative identity disorder, and students love that. They
gobble it up.
love the concept. When I saw Split, I'm thinking there's some accuracies, inaccuracies. This
Mhm.
would be great for my students. And I have them submit analyses on, what was
Mhm.
accurate in the film, what was inaccurate. And once I saw it, I said, okay, this is great because there's so much myth surrounding this disorder. Students come in with their preconceived notions of what they think it is.
Mhm.
And in addition, this film is kind of stigmatizing in,
Okay.
the violence.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. And the fact that some of the characters' main characteristics revolve around the horror aspect
Yes.
of the film.
Yes.
And something perhaps supernatural. But yeah, okay, I can dig the stigmatizing aspect of it. That's awesome. So let's actually, because of the nature of our discussion in this episode, I think let's just jump right into it.
Sure.
So the disorder that you are talking about is dissociative identity disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And at the top of the show, I mentioned that up until I believe the DSM-4, it was referred to as multiple personality disorder.
Yes.
And some of the synopses actually sort of jumble this one too. They say 23 distinct personalities, and that obviously that nomenclature these days is incorrect. It should be 23 distinct identities because of the renaming of the disorder in the DSM-4TR and into the DSM-5.
Yes.
So let's talk about DID in like a broad sense, as far as it being an identified diagnostic and statistical manual diagnosis. What is dissociative identity disorder, Lyra?
Okay, well, let's start with the basics. Dissociation in general is it's kind of like your conscious attention is elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've ever had the experience of driving somewhere and you arrived at your destination and you're thinking, gee, I don't remember making those turns, but I'm here because, I'm sort of on automatic pilot. Or you go into the movie theater, you're so engrossed in the film and you're unaware of your surroundings until the end of the movie. So that's sort of what dissociation is. And if we look at it from a neurological viewpoint, our conscious attention is so limited. And sometimes we don't focus it on what is going on around us.
Right.
So people who experience dissociation, many times they will report that they've lost time. They say, I don't remember what happened during this period of time. And they'll recount these intense negative experiences that they've had. And usually when there's a loss of time, the therapist will consider dissociative disorders.
Okay.
So, dissociative disorders, when we form a memory, it gets, it's processed by the hippocampus. It's stored in these long-term associative networks in our frontal cortex, in our cortical matter. For some reason, there is so much emotional activation of the amygdala that it doesn't get stored correctly. So some memories are just not accessible to our conscious awareness.
Right.
So sometimes when someone has a trauma early in life that they can't escape, they will just go somewhere else. They will dissociate. So their mind, their conscious awareness just goes somewhere else. So the memories they have are not integrated into their conscious memory store.
Mm-hmm.
And they're only brought up when there are stimuli in the environment that remind them of first the incident that they may have dissociated from and the emotions. So all of our memories are tagged with an emotion. And if your conscious
Right.
awareness says, wait a second, some memory is about to come up that is really intensely negative, the person, their conscious awareness will just go elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll just lose time. And there are a variety of dissociation disorders. There's depersonalization, where the person will feel like they're floating above their body.
Yeah.
Derealization.
That was just on Reddit. I was reading on Reddit. Somebody was asking a question about depersonalization, derealization, and you were just about to.
Yeah, to me, it's amazing. This is, the processes going on in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
There is so much we're not aware of, so much that's unconscious. And I think these disorders really show how, vast the brain is and how much we don't know about what's going on.
Right.
And derealization, when you're in a dream, things seem fuzzy, they may seem clearer, the colors may be changed, and that's what people may experience. Now, with every disorder in the DSM, it's always a degree. So some people, they just experience the depersonalization, the derealization, and this is maybe their memories are compartmentalized, the memories of the trauma. So,
So I'm curious then. So the case that really kind of brought this to a lot of people's minds was Sybil, which was a film that was based on a real person, which is why I'm bringing it up, because they made a film about it. And so that's the original DID movie to a lot of people. But did they I know reports came out recently, or maybe it wasn't so recent, I don't know, it seemed recent to me, that it's probably apparent that Sybil was lying.
Yeah, she admitted she was lying. She
admitted it. Okay.
Yes, she was playing a role for her therapist. Now, sometimes therapists, they have a case of dissociation. And they're thinking, hey, maybe it's, what we used to call multiple personality disorder, which is now called dissociative identity disorder. Possibly this is what I have here. So they may put the person under hypnosis, and many people tend to believe that hypnosis can bring up repressed memories.
Right.
But what it actually does, it makes the client more suggestible.
Yeah.
So by no intentional mean, the therapist didn't intentionally do that, but may have planted, in Sybil's mind that Sybil may have different personalities, and Sybil decided to play along with that.
She decided to play along with it. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So she really didn't experience any real depersonalization, maybe some compartmentalization for some of the things, but definitely not derealization, I would imagine. So that's a bit of a bummer. Are there any other famous cases of dissociative identity disorder that have been, I don't know, I wouldn't say verified, but corroborated?
That's a really controversial topic, because you have a camp of therapists who believe it's a real thing, and then you have a camp that doesn't.
Right.
And they say mostly maybe you don't know about it because you haven't been trained in it.
Uh-huh.
But
That's the elitist answer that I want.
I know. Yeah, you can rationalize anything if you really try.
Right. So if there's, so we have this one camp and we have the other camp. I do, when I bring up DID in my Gen Psych class, I'll say that, this is a super rare because of its controversial nature. So it's like, if it's rare because maybe it doesn't happen all that often because it takes a lot of misfiring in the brain, or two, that it's kind of like it's rare because we don't diagnose it all that often.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
So is it real, or is it just something that we put these sort of random-ish sensations that are divorced from perceptions? So we put them into a group as opposed to having like depressive disorders, which have a kind of related set of correlate symptoms and anxiety disorders and so on.
If you're asking me, I'd say there's a definite compartmentalization of memories and associated emotions. I wouldn't say they're different identities, but then you have to ask yourself, what is identity? Identity is your past memories and the emotions you associate with it. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's completely separate identities. It's just really different aspects of the person. And it's interesting that the movie is named Split because DID is a complete split of memories. That's how they describe it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So, and well, that brings up a good point. I'm going to play a clip of the Dr. Fletcher in the film, where she is doing what I think is the first zoom into a conference I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go ahead and play that clip, and then we'll come back to it.
Identity in an individual with dissociative identity disorder can have high cholesterol. 1. There have been cases where one identity is allergic to bee stings, the others are not.
Are there moments where two identities can coexist at the same time?
There are times when two identities can take the light or the spot or consciousness at the same time. This happened with a student that I was working with, and her left and right hand were taking notes in different handwritings about separate things at the same time. The differences in the identities can be dramatic, as much as the difference between you and me and every person in that auditorium. The identities have different IQs. They have different physical strengths. One personality is a Russian weightlifter and can lift 3 times his body weight. Their ability to hyper-focus and have different experiences is astounding. Have these individuals, through their suffering, unlocked the potential of the brain? Is this the ultimate doorway to all things we call unknown? Is this where our sense of the supernatural comes from?
So, Lyra, after that scene where Dr. Fletcher is explaining what DID is, maybe for the reasons that you said a few minutes ago with the two different camps, maybe she's obviously in the it exists camp, but maybe she was trying to describe to the other camp. What do you think about the description that they give in the film, as well as then the portrayal of DID in the film?
Well, I obviously she believes it exists, and she talks about differences in cholesterol, and later in the film they talk about differences in diabetes. There's no real way to determine that. cholesterol is something that changes over time depending on what you eat and your bodily state. How can they definitively determine if one identity has high cholesterol or not?
Right. And I'll just speak to that because, it always struck me as a simpler answer that cholesterol is that when this person seems to have dissociative episodes, they're probably eating a lot of high cholesterol foods. And then when they're not dissociating, they go back to maybe lower cholesterol things. And so you get these expansions and contractions. That seems like a much simpler answer.
Yeah, no, I agree. And they talk about difference in strengths. You always hear stories of a mother is trying to save her son and she lifted a car.
Yep.
Our bodies change with our fight or flight response. This doesn't mean we have different personalities, different identities. This is the way the body works. We all know times where we may appear to have different personalities just because of the situation and what's going on. And then, she goes into unlocking the potential of the brain. And I always relate this to Morgan Freeman in Lucy.
Right.
He says, what if we can use 20% of our brain? And, I'm just sitting there rolling my eyes because, of course, we use our whole brain all the time. And, when I show this scene in class, my students actually laugh. They say, this is, just ridiculous what she's talking about. Obviously for dramatic purposes that, we can do this. And, sometimes I've heard of situations where therapists, they like to have, clients who suffer from these unique disorders because, it gives them something else to work with.
Right. And they can write it up and it'll get published and as a case study and all of these different things. So yeah, there is some sort of fame associated with there. And it strikes me that her character, she seems to focus on strange-ish mental cases. So it seems like her forte are these unexplained issues.
Yeah. And if we're looking at this in terms of accuracy, she has violated so many client therapists' boundaries by going to Kevin's house and, not disclosing when she got all those emails from Barry saying, okay, maybe Kevin, as she calls him, needs to be hospitalized, So I use the stereotype of Dr. Wonderful that we tend to see in films, like with Good Will Hunting. The therapist is always involved in your life and outside of the therapeutic relationship. And, that's what she seems overstepping all of these boundaries.
Yes, and the kinds of conversations that she has with Barry and who then appears who is actually Dennis, who is the one of the ringleaders, and he acts more like somebody who seems to have OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and like she sees through it, and that tells you that she has had a lot of conversations with Kevin Wendell Crumb, the supposedly main identity.
To whom am I speaking with now?
Dr. Fletcher, it's Barry.
It doesn't seem like Barry. Barry is an extroverted leader.
Yes, I am.
I'm going to take a professional guess based on the description of all 23 identities that live in Kevin's body. that I've gotten from Barry. I think I'm talking to Dennis. I'm encouraged we can finally meet. And I've guessed this because you've adjusted the chocolate dish twice since you came in here, and I understand you have OCD.
No, I see. Now I see. That's clever. That's clever. But I'm not Dennis.
And you and Patricia have been banned from the light for quite a while now, primarily, shall we say, because of your beliefs.
Patricia and Dennis are very unstable. I'm not Dennis.
Have you both taken charge now?
Please believe me. I'm Barry.
Right. And so this brings up an inaccuracy in the film when, she indicates, call him by his real name. And he sort of is Kevin for a minute. And he says, wait, isn't this 2014?
Right.
You would think she would have done this before. And he would have memories that are, more recent than 2014.
Right. Yeah, because the movie came out in 2017. So, we're assuming that that's the year.
Right.
And so, he was not there? He was
right.
apparently
he was
not
for
dissociating for 2 or 3 years.
Right.
Yeah,
and, if a therapist was really working with DID, she would try to integrate the personalities, try to bring out Kevin, try to ask him about things, try to reintegrate all of these memories. So the fact that he doesn't have any memory after 2014 is an inaccuracy.
Right. And there are a lot of inaccuracies associated with how, even though I do say it's a great performance with how James McAvoy goes in between them. So what are some details about that inaccuracy?
So, usually you don't know about these, and I call them different states of memory, but different identities.
Sure.
Because you're consciously not there. Now, if you're in therapy and the therapist can guide you through this, then you actually know that these are there. But at the end of the movie, you see Kevin looking into the mirror and all of the identities coming in and out very rapidly. That just doesn't happen. It takes a while to make this shift. And there's something in the stimuli in the environment, no matter what it is, that usually brings out an identity, which I call a memory emotional combination.
When you phrase it like that, it would make sense that different cues would bring about different states, as they do in all of us, right? As these kind of memory cues have for all of us, like a musical note or a smell or a movie.
Very potent when our memory is just stored in these associations, and anything that reminds you, it's going to bring up a network of memories.
Right. So one aspect of how the disorder is portrayed by James McAvoy is, or actually, as I suppose this is also M. Night's fault with the writing, is they all refer to having the spotlight being the conscious identity as getting the light. Is this something that is reported by DID cases in real life? Or is some phrasing given for that, or is that just a license by M. Night?
It is. So the spotlight, that's really referring to what we usually call memory. Working memory, consciousness, attention, and it's very limited. So it makes sense that only if memory is completely split or compartmentalized, that only one compartment of memory would come to consciousness at a time. So that part is accurate. But then Dr. Fletcher talks about two identities coming into the spotlight, which could happen during therapy when you're trying to integrate these disparate memory stores together.
Oh, okay.
So it's not so much that, hey, there are two memories here, but we're starting to integrate these. They're becoming aware of each other. We're going to integrate them into one memory store, hopefully. So that's usually the prescribed therapeutic technique. And you tend to see that as therapy progresses.
Okay. So I'm going to keep on that point here, but we're going to take a quick break and come right back. Hey, listener. Thanks for sticking around this episode. I hope you're enjoying it. Anyway, I need your help in growing this podcast's audience. In past episodes, I've asked you to share this podcast with 5 of your friends. Let's keep doing that. Share this podcast on social media, especially if you really liked an episode. Share that episode. Tell 5 of your friends or family if they have an interest in film or psychology, or even better, both. Growing the audience is our goal for the second year of programming, and so we need your help to get that done. Other ways to contribute to the podcast include tips to our PayPal, found on our website, becoming a patron at patreon.com/cinemapsychpod, rocking some sweet merch from our Spreadshirt shop, and or leaving us a rating or review on your favorite podcast service. Now back to the show. Okay, Lyra, we were talking about the inaccuracies of the movie Split, starring James McAvoy, written by M. Night Shyamalan. You know, the return to some sort of M. Night normalcy. So, Dr. Fletcher, at the end of the movie, goes to confront all of them. But Kevin, who is the supposed dominant or main identity, the original identity, I suppose. But she ends up releasing the tagged 24th identity, which is some monstrous beast called the Horde. What do we make of that? I know this adds some supernatural elements to it, and the sort of universe building that M. Night later did in Glass. What is going on here? What is this supposed to be a metaphor for?
Yeah, I honestly, I was disappointed when I saw this part of the film.
For the first time, I imagine, right? For the
first time, yes.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can't do that. And Dr. Fletcher tries to integrate some reality into it and say, yeah, you can change physiology with different states. And she's talking about identity. But the creation of a beast that's, we can't deviate from
you wrote
our
about a
potential.
Woman in Germany who'd been blind for 10 years. And then it was discovered that she had DID. Then 3 of her identities developed sight. And you speculated that her optical nerves regenerated because of her beliefs.
What are you trying to say?
There are things, Dr. Fletcher, that all of us would find hard to believe.
Are you trying to tell me there's a 24th identity?
You protect the broken. When you said that you thought this situation was extraordinary, I knew you could maybe understand.
Understand what?
The beast is real. He's just emerged. You were right about everything.
What does he look like?
He's much bigger than I am. And I'm the biggest of all of us. He's tall. He's very muscular. He's got a long mane of hair, and his fingers are for twice the length of ours. He believes we are extraordinary, that we don't represent a mistake, but our potential. You say the same things. He's on the move.
What does that mean? I don't understand. He can't be real. There must be limits to what a human being can become.
She talks about differences in IQ, and I can see that between, different states that we have normally, but we can't go above our potential. So, this is really ridiculous. It makes for good drama. My students love this part, but I have to bring them back down and say, this just can't happen. This isn't within the realms of reality. And, we talk about the stigma because in society, there's this stigma that people with mental illness, and especially DID, because DID is never really portrayed accurately, that people are violent. And they have real, people who suffer from dissociation, their lives are very difficult. They're usually hospitalized. They usually have to go through years and years of therapy. And when they see something like this, it's very stigmatizing. And people don't want to admit, I'm dealing with this disorder.
Yeah, I think it's the classic trope, so film trope of when somebody is expressing a different identity within the same body, that we get to shed our moral and ethical requirements, and we get to go do whatever we want. And so this trope has been around for a really long time, and immediately it just because we've become depersonalized does not mean that we go, oh, okay, I get to go, murder people now because I don't have a moral or ethical reason for being.
Right, exactly. And that it's somehow an excuse for engaging in, what we consider to be acceptable behavior.
Yeah.
And we tend to see this a lot. And what I really want to do in my movie class is to have students understand how these disorders really play out and how, when the public sees this and they internalize what they see about people with mental illness, how that, just keeps the stigma that we have that, people with mental illness can be violent or, they can't function in society. We need to be scared of them. And unfortunately, this film tends to perpetuate that.
Yeah. And I was going back and forth with this movie and the portrayal of DID and the movie that came out in 2003, Identity, which is a really good film. It'll probably be on the podcast one day, not too close to this episode because it'd be literally the same thing.
Right.
But don't tell anyone that. So
it's a great movie. I was thinking about using that movie too.
Right. I mean, it's like 6 to 1, half a dozen the other. Which one do I do? Okay, let's go with the more modern one, I suppose. It's got names people know these days.
Right.
So Identity has a similar end to it as the main identity in that film. That character is institutionalized for acts of violence.
Right.
And it turns out that he's got a number of identities. Oh, maybe I won't spoil it for anyone, not on this podcast.
No,
I'll spoil it on the other episode. So that movie is predicated on violent DID.
Yeah.
It's all violent, and these people either need to be in prison or institutionalized.
Mhm.
And obviously, you'd want to go with the institutionalized and not prison.
Right.
So it seems like Dr. Fletcher has neglected her duty for Kevin Crumb.
Yeah, I agree. He should have been hospitalized. Instead of her going over there. Obviously, there would not be any story if she did that. But when she realized something may be going on, usually you want to make sure that the person is not a threat. And that the person is safe. And unfortunately, many people with DID, because they experience dissociation, do end up hospitalized for a period of time.
Yeah, and I guess maybe a question that I have for the reason for hospitalization. How long? And I don't think we mentioned this earlier when we were talking about DID in general. How long are the dissociative episodes? How long have they been reported to last among the average sufferer?
Oh, okay. So it varies extensively.
I figured.
Yeah, it really does. And I'd say it could be with incomplete splitting, I would say maybe a few hours. With complete splitting, it could be days.
Days.
Yeah, it could be weeks. And what the therapist wants to do is bring up what may have happened in the past. And I know this sounds really Freudian, but we call it abreaction, where the associated memories and emotions come up and the individual can piece them together into a coherent association. And that tends to help with the dissociation. So it depends on how long it takes to recover these. What's interesting is that the person really has to make a choice. So if they've been dissociating, it's usually because of some early trauma. So do they want to continue dissociating? Is it working for them? Usually it doesn't. Or are they going to uncover all of these horrors that happened to them when they were younger that the original person can't recall because they were so horrible? So it's on a case by case basis. It depends on the degree of the splitting that they experience.
And I would imagine, from a non-clinical perspective, I would imagine not complete splitting seems more common than complete splitting.
It is. That's why many people, it's very controversial. Many people don't think DID exists. They think it's just dissociation, and the therapist is interpreting this as DID. And ever since Sybil, the cases have expanded, and now you have reports of up to 100 different personalities. And it's really confined within the United States and Canada. And it's strange. For example, another westernized culture, such as the United Kingdom, doesn't report as many cases as we do here. So I think, it's part of the therapist saying, well, there's some dissociation going on here. Let's see to what extent the splitting occurs. And they may conclude, based on their professional opinion, that it is DID.
Oh, I see. So, I mean, there's a long process, but it is kind of suspect that it's only in North America.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing that officially Canada uses the ICD-10.
ICD, right.
So, I mean, it wouldn't be like this is an American thing.
Right.
So maybe there's just a lot of spillover in usage.
Yeah, there is. You know, the clinicians have to make an assessment based on their knowledge. So it does vary to some extent.
Yeah, that's kind of strange. So one question that I did not put on the notes that I had for you regarding this film is the female character played by Anya Taylor-Joy. And I guess maybe, have you seen Glass?
I saw parts of it. Honestly, I had to turn it off. I hate to say that, but it was so...
No, that's fine. I think M. Night doesn't know when to stop.
Exactly.
Doesn't know when things are good.
I know,
buddy, dude. Don't ruin it.
Just
so,
leave it.
and I'm not surprised that you had to turn it off. It did draw on just way too long.
Yeah.
So in that film, Anya Taylor-Joy plays Casey again. I believe her name is Casey, right?
Yes.
And she plays her again, and she's trying to get Kevin to come back, even though Glass wants the Horde to come out. And this carries through their relationship in Split, which happens, I believe, a couple of years prior, something like to the events of the other, or a year maybe, something like that. It's not too far in time. Casey's character, what do we think? Is this some like massive amounts of pity, trying to save, Stockholm syndrome? Like, what? Why is she so fascinated with Kevin's character, James McAvoy?
Well, I think, and we talk about this in my class. I think she can relate to him. So we've come to the conclusion that she suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, and which is sort of a variant of dissociation. It includes dissociative experiences, and but she remembers her trauma. So her splitting is not as extensive as Kevin. So with PTSD, you have the flashbacks, you have the anxiety, and this usually happens when a trauma occurs later in life. We know with Kevin, it was his mother who was very authoritarian and rigid, and he probably ended up dissociating during his early trauma. But she remembers it. She knows what happened, and this plagues her. So to some extent, she probably sympathizes with him. She probably, understands what he has gone through. That this wasn't his choice to experience the splitting of his consciousness, really.
Sure. And what is the evidence in the film that she suffers from PTSD? Because I'm having trouble placing that.
She's very easy to startle to. So people with PTSD have an easier startle response. She has these flashbacks that we do see, and that's very common when someone is feeling stress. They tend to have flashbacks to their previous trauma because they haven't integrated the memory properly. We also see that she tells the other girls what to do. She understands his mindset. So in one scene, he calls one of the girls out and she says, okay, I recognize this. This is what you can do to help yourself. And then Kevin sort of empathizes with her at some point. And that's probably why she was able to escape and survive what was
Sure.
going on.
That is wonderful. Thank you for that. I'll have to go back and watch it with that in mind. Because I don't know if I was picking that up the first time I saw it.
Mhm.
So yeah. So I have one more question for you, Lyra, before we end our conversation
Sure.
here. Who, and this is just purely, this is not scientific, this is just preference. Who was your favorite identity?
Patricia, definitely. And yes, to me, this was the incarnation of his mother. Sometimes, right.
Sure, okay.
Right. With the obsessive compulsive disorder, everything has to be perfect. So sometimes you see memories compartmentalized with the authority figure. And that was really my favorite. And I know my students, they always jump. And, when the girls are looking through the peephole and they see, oh, there's someone else out there. Let's try to make noise. So they know we're locked in this room. And it's Kevin dressed as Patricia, with the skirt on. And they're just they're appalled. They have no idea what's going on. I'd say it's my favorite part of the film.
Yeah, they're probably, if the Silence of the Lambs existed in this universe, they probably would have been like, I would much rather put lotion on because at least I know what Buffalo Bill wants from me.
Exactly. Yeah. And then they're like, okay, we got to rethink this whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now that you mention that it's the incarnation of his mother, how when there were only two girls left, Casey and I can't remember the other one, she invites them into the little kitchenette and to make them a sandwich, and she cuts it and just slams her hands down and says it's not straight.
Yes.
So really gut-wrenching scene, but I totally see it now.
Yeah, and usually when you suffer this type of trauma, usually the parental figures are authoritarian and rigid and wants things a certain way. And I have to tell you, I also love Hedwig. And my students love the scene where he brings Casey in and starts dancing. He wants to show off his dancing abilities. And, sometimes some memory is compartmentalized as the child who endured the trauma. So you do see different developmental stages.
That is, there you go. It's another one that I actually didn't catch. I figured that it was the infantile sort of childlike behavior, but I didn't actually connect them all because Dennis might, I guess, be his dad.
It could be. We don't know much about his father in this, in the movie. That would be a good idea if M. Night wanted to do a prequel. And I know, what was it? I can't remember the name. It's not Broken. It's, what was the prequel?
Unbreakable?
Unbreakable, yeah.
Yeah.
He could do an in-between Unbreakable and Split.
Yeah, that would be, I mean, I don't know if he should because
that's true. As you said, let's leave it.
Right.
Yeah.
He doesn't know when to stop an idea sometimes.
Right.
So that makes sense that it's all connected, and I'm sure it's Dennis is somebody we know. My favorite identity, the Horde notwithstanding, because that would, I mean, a lot of it was camera trickery, and so James McAvoy got ripped for that role because all he had to do was buff him out. And they did some camera light and trickery stuff to make him look bigger, but dude was still ripped. So
he was.
The Horde, excellent. But my favorite identity that has like an identity in the film, it's actually Dennis playing Barry.
Oh, yeah. When he's talking to Dr. Fletcher.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And she's like, I don't think you're Barry.
Yeah. And then she watches him leaving and notices something with the trash can.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that was good. I mean, James McAvoy was great in this movie. Kudos for him being able to portray those different personalities so accurately and having to go back and forth.
Yeah, and well done on the consistency. I know probably he shot scenes as one person every day.
Right.
So it was easier on him, but it still comes through like he's linearly switching identities on point. It's very good. And like some of the other ones that you see when Casey's looking at the computer.
Oh yeah.
Like there's there's a really boring professor type.
Yep.
And the first time I saw it, I identified very hard with that character.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh wait, that's me. Oh. So other than I thought that was he did an immaculate job, and I will say that it's a pretty slim cast, but Anya Taylor-Joy was a interesting character. I think she, now that I sort of have internalized the PTSD and sort of connected it with the things that I remember from the film, she did. I think she did a phenomenal job of somebody who was dealing with that, but also very quietly. Like it was a very quietly stated aspect to her character, which is why I missed it. So.
Yeah, it was like you could understand what she was going through just by her facial expressions and her demeanor, and the fact that she was a little stronger than the other girls. Like this wasn't something new to her, being in a trauma situation.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Now that I see it, I will have to. I hope it's streaming somewhere because I'll have to watch it again. Maybe have it on the background while I'm at work or something. Shh, don't tell anyone I do that. I want to thank Lyra Stein for joining me to discuss Split. I appreciate your insight on all of the film stuff that I missed. And while we say goodbye, would there be like anything that you'd like to plug? Where can folks find out more about your work?
So I have a website that's connected with Rutgers. I'm also on the Society for Teaching of Psychology's Facebook page. If anyone wants to join, a wealth of information, especially since we're teaching virtually now. Yeah. So feel free to join. And I will be hosting the International Twitter Poster Conference, which is coming up soon.
Yeah, I'm on that committee too. And
that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We will. That's coming up in a month, actually.
It is.
Just a little under a month. So head over to the STP website. I know this. So this is going to go out somewhere around October 12th there, and so you still have time to register. Pre-registering's not required, but go ahead and plug that since we're both on the IT PC committee.
Definitely, yes.
I think I got that. We want to promote that. So teachpsych.org and find the details on that one. November 1st and 2nd. Woo! Well, thank you again, Lyra.
You're welcome.
That's going to be it for this episode. Until the next one, thanks for listening.